there's another acronym I want you to be familiar of. So, it's ESSE. So this answers the question on why HIV is not in the mucus, okay, and why on the other fluids. So first of all, for you to for HIV to be transmitted, this is a requirement. Okay, the ESSE is a requirement of how HIV can be successfully be transmitted. So we've seen some of the fluids that can be high risk, low risk, but this can also help. So first is an exit. Okay, the fluid has to come out. So all of those fluids that we mentioned, breast milk, vaginal fluid, semen, mucus, saliva, they all exit the body. Correct? Okay, so it has to exit the body. The second thing is survivability. Okay. So what we have to understand about HIV is it's one of the most delicate viruses in the world. So when it is outside of the human body, so when the temperature becomes low, the humidity, the moisture, so it is exposed to other elements, so like air and water outside the body, it dies. Compared to other viruses such as hepatitis B, they can actually live outside of the human body. And A and hepatitis viruses can be in surfaces. So that's why when we clean in hygiene and stuff. So survivability, this actually answers the question on, yes, when we have infected blood, for example, and it is on it has spilled over the floor, and then you came in, and then you stumbled, and the blood was all over your face and stuff. So the question there is, of course, there's exit, but then survivability is how long has the blood been outside, and those things. So it has to be, HIV has to survive, and in a state where it can survive, which is inside of the human body. The other thing is sufficiency. So actually survivability answers the question on the mucus. So the mucus, as well as the saliva, they contain more of the elements that doesn't support the survival of HIV. So usually there's a lot more water, and it's the warmth is not optimal for the virus to multiply. So survivability is also why there are high risk and low risk fluids, because these fluids that are usually high risk is where HIV can continue to thrive as well. So that's within the human body, meaning that there are differences of where they are. So that's why tears wouldn't have HIV. It's more water. Saliva has much more water. So there are very specific conditions where HIV is best would survive. The next is sufficiency. So the reason why we say it's low risk in some of the fluids like saliva, mucus, tears, sweat, because there can still be a possibility that there are some human deficient HIVs there, but are they enough to cause an infection? So that is why we had, of course, this joke about saliva. When you kiss someone, you can only get HIV by drinking gallons of the saliva to actually have a successful infection. So that's impractical, because there are no sufficient viruses, because they could not survive in that kind of fluid. Okay. And of course, the other one is entry. Okay, so the body fluid has to exit, and that fluid, the HIV has to survive, so the conditions have to be there, and it has to be sufficient, and it will enter inside. So for example, that image that I told you, if there's a blood of JP's blood on the floor, and you came in from here rushing because you were late, and then you fell in your face, so would HIV be transmitted through that? So that's the question. So we just go through this acronym. So first of all, there was exit because there's blood in the floor. In JP's body, there's blood there. And the next question is survivability. So how long has the blood been outside of JP's body? So it's been exposed to the air, and it's colder outside, you feel it here. It would have been dead already, in a matter of a few seconds. And sufficiency, of course, how much of it, how much viruses. So this is where we ask, if JP has been already taking medication. And as we saw in the graph yesterday, when you take ARBs, the virus actually goes down to a point where we call it undetectable. Right? So how many copies less than 40 per milliliter is undetectable. So that means actually a high-risk fluid, which is blood, JP's blood, becomes a low-risk fluid. So and the low-risk fluids of JP, like his saliva, his sweat, his tears, you become no risk. Because if the high-risk fluids already have become low risk, then automatically the low-risk ones would have no copies of HIV at all. Because there's so little already, only 40 copies per milliliter, and you could only expect that for them to be found in the high-risk fluids. So this is how the medical science has advanced, and now we understand the virus better. And for example, I will ask you now, because a lot of the things that come after this exercise is, how can HIV, would I be infected if this happens? So, for example, mosquitoes. Let's analyze, because mosquitoes drink blood, and they bite another one. Could you get HIV from mosquito bites? No. Okay, let's try to understand the answer of no in this thing. So first of all, there is an exit of the body fluid from the body, so that when a mosquito bites, it goes into the mosquito. So the next question is, would it survive? What do you think? Would HIV survive inside the mosquito? No. Okay, that's correct. And as well as sufficiency as well is also a question. So if it didn't survive, so meaning the sufficiency would not be at all enough because it's already dead. And of course, entry is when, here is actually the other clarification when it comes to mosquito bites. Mosquitoes drink blood, okay, and then it is in their tummy. So when they bite another one, they do not inject the blood back to the person. It's because that would actually look like the mosquito vomiting what it ate to you. So diseases that are mosquito-borne, that are transmitted by mosquitoes, like malaria, or the dengue virus, and other kinds of diseases, because these bacteria or viruses are in the saliva of the mosquito. They're not in the tummy, so that's how that body fluid, the saliva, mosquito saliva, enters into the body to cause disease, and those are other diseases. So that is why we reflect on this. So different instances, we always have to check this category. For example, can you think of any question on transmission in relation to body fluid?
So earlier we just had a question about, is breast milk high risk or low risk?
Okay.
So let's do breast milk.
Okay, breast milk. So breast milk, so it exits from the breast when the baby is being fed. Survivability. So it is established that breast milk, it has ideal conditions for HIV to also be there. So that is why it can survive. And sufficient amounts, because when you feed, of course, then that's a lot. The entry here is the key thing, I think, on how we discuss on, even if you're an HIV positive mother, how can you prevent the baby from getting infected? So we go back here. So exit, of course, we cannot, that's a natural way of breastfeeding. But survivability, it's a given, it's a high-risk fluid like blood, it's there. So this is where we change things to make sure that transmission doesn't happen. Sufficiency is when the mother is taking medication, then the viral load lowers. So even if the virus survives in the breast milk, but sufficiency is lowered. And entry is another one. So we always think of When the baby feeds, it goes into the esophagus or the food pipe. Okay? And the only way, actually, naturally, the survivability, the virus gets killed in the stomach acid of the baby. Okay? It gets killed with the stomach acid. But the entry usually happens when there's an opening, okay, from the mouth to the food pipe. And usually this happens, that's why the teaching that we give to mothers who are HIV positive, because breastfeeding is important. You know, it is important for the immunity, and that is actually how you transfer the antibodies from the mother to the baby. You know, that's you give that, so it's very important. So the baby, there is entry when there is tears. So that only happens when the baby is mixed fed. You know, so what that means is when you introduce, instead of just breast milk, you introduce something solid. Even if it's very soft, you know, the baby's food pipe and mouth is not the same as ours. It's fully developed. It's very delicate. So having mixed food, so breast milk plus some other solid foods can cause those small tears, and that can cause the entry. Okay, so we always analyze the context of the situation. So if this is a mother who knew her status and she is taking medication, so sufficiency is lowered, the viral load is lowered. And of course, if the mother makes sure that the baby is only exclusively breastfed for the 6 months, then entry is
Unlikely.
unlikely. Questions? Any situation you'd like to use this category? Yes.
Sometimes the breast of the mother have the wound.
Yes.
And
Yes, that's correct.
she is feeding the child. How is it?
So then you have two
Yeah.
fluids that come in. So there it could be blood and breast milk.
Yeah.
So because this you cannot help. The blood would exit and the breast milk, and survivability is because blood and breast milk are high-risk fluids. So again, it's the same thing. You know, so if the mother is taking medication, so the sufficiency of the virus is lowered, and then the entry is the thing. Even if there was blood and breast milk, but then there is no entry point on the baby because he or she is exclusively breastfed, then HIV transmission doesn't happen. You know, so see how knowledge is so important when we educate, because it only takes a small entry point. No? HIV does not discriminate; it only looks for an entry point. But what we can do on our work with HIV is how to make it difficult for it to entry. So it is from not exiting. So usually that's why we use condoms, for example. The body exits, but it does not exit and enter another. It stops somewhere. You know, so that's why we have barrier methods. So condoms can be here. Medication is important because then it deals with this. You know, so even if it enters, because it's not enough and it did not survive, so HIV transmission doesn't happen. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.